The first-class cabin fell silent as Dominique Carter revealed his company badge. The same flight attendant who'd spent 20 minutes trying to remove his children now stammered apologies. Too late. His phone was already recording, and tomorrow the airline would learn what discrimination really costs. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed discrimination in public spaces, and subscribe to join our community fighting for equality. Now, let's see how this powerful confrontation unfolded. Jamal Carter was not a man who took things for granted. At 45, he had built Nextech Solutions from his garage into a cybersecurity powerhouse valued at $2.3 billion. As one of the few black-owned tech firms to break into the Fortune 500, Jamal knew every success came with twice the scrutiny and half the forgiveness afforded to his white counterparts. The morning light filtered through the windows of their Atlanta home as Jamal checked his children's competition materials one last time. His 16-year-old twins, Zora and Zaire Carter, had inherited his analytical mind and their late mother's creative spirit, a combination that had earned them spots at the National Youth STEM Innovation Challenge in San Francisco. "You got your presentation backed up in 3 different places?" Jamal asked, handing Zora her tablet. Zora rolled her eyes affectionately. "Cloud storage, external drive, and email. Plus hard copies." "Seriously, Dad, you taught us better than that." "Just checking," Jamal smiled, the pride evident in his eyes. "This competition could open doors that I had to break down." Zaire adjusted his glasses, a nervous habit he'd developed since childhood. "The judges are from MIT, Stanford, and Google. If we place in the top 3. "When you place in the top 3, Jamal corrected, placing a firm hand on his son's shoulder. Growing up in South Chicago, Jamal had promised himself that if he ever had children, they would never face the limitations he had. His own father had worked double shifts at a factory for 30 years, saving every extra penny for Jamal's education. That sacrifice had gotten him to a state college, where he'd slept in the computer lab more often than his dorm room, developing the security algorithms that would eventually become Nextech's foundation. Their driver loaded their luggage into the company car as Jamal reviewed his own schedule. The twins would be in San Francisco for 5 days. He had planned to attend the first 2 days of the competition before flying back for a crucial board meeting. Atlanta International Airport buzzed with the usual morning rush as their car pulled up to the departures terminal. As they checked in at the first-class counter, Jamal's phone rang. The screen displayed his COO's name, Sydney Williams. "I need to take this," he told the twins, stepping aside. "Go ahead and get your boarding passes." Sydney's voice was tight with tension. "We've got a situation with the Department of Defense contract. Their security team is claiming our encryption protocol has a backdoor vulnerability." Jamal's jaw clenched. The DoD contract represented nearly 30% of their projected revenue for the next fiscal year. "That's impossible. We've run penetration tests for months. They're threatening to pull out unless we address it immediately. Their team is standing by for an emergency conference call." Jamal checked his watch. Their flight was boarding in 40 minutes. "Set it up. I'll find somewhere quiet." He returned to the twins, who were now holding their first-class boarding passes and looking at him expectantly. "Emergency at work," he explained. "I need to handle this before we board." Zora's face fell slightly. "But we're boarding soon." "I know, sweetheart. Listen, you two go ahead to the gate. I'll join you before takeoff. If I'm cutting it close, just board without me and save my seat." He handed them each $100. "Get whatever you want at the terminal." Zaire nodded seriously, always the more practical twin. "We've got this, Dad. Go save the company." Again, Zora added with a grin. Jamal watched them walk toward security, Zora's vibrant blue braids bouncing against her shoulders, Zaire's tall frame already drawing looks from passers-by. He felt the familiar twinge of worry that accompanied being a black father in America. He had taught them how to move through the world, how to be exceptional without being threatening, how to stand their ground without escalating situations. Lessons no parent should have to teach. As he hurried to the airline's business lounge, he missed the sideways glances the twins received as they moved through the terminal. Missed the way an elderly white woman clutched her purse tighter as Zaire passed. Missed the TSA agent who checked Zora's ID twice while waving through the white teenagers behind her. The twins, however, noticed it all. They had been noticing such things since they were old enough to understand the subtle language of prejudice. But today, they were focused on the competition ahead. They had earned their place, and nothing would distract them from showing the world exactly what they could do. Little did they know that before they even reached San Francisco, they would face a different kind of challenge, one that no amount of preparation could have readied them for. Gate A7 was already crowded when Zora and Zaire arrived. The digital display showed their flight to San Francisco would begin boarding in 15 minutes. They found seats near the gate, Zaire immediately pulling out his tablet to review their presentation while Zora scanned the growing crowd. First-class passengers will begin boarding shortly, announced a gate agent, a thin man with a name tag reading, Benjamin Roberts. Several business travelers gathered their belongings, mostly older white men in expensive suits. Zora nudged her brother. "That's us too." Zaire looked up from his tablet, momentarily disoriented as he shifted focus from complex algorithms to the present moment. "Right. Dad's still not here." Zora checked her phone. "No messages. He said to go ahead if he's running late." They collected their carry-ons and moved toward the priority boarding line. A flight attendant with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a tight smile stood checking boarding passes. Her name tag read, Heather Blackwell. "Boarding passes, please," she said as an older white couple presented their tickets. She scanned them quickly, her smile widening. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson. Enjoy your flight." When the twins stepped forward, her smile faded. "Boarding passes?" Zora handed over both their passes. "We're in first class. Seats 3A and 3B. Heather's eyes narrowed as she examined their passes with unusual scrutiny. She looked from the passes to their faces several times, her expression growing increasingly skeptical. "These are first-class tickets," she stated, as though they might be unaware. "Yes," Zaire confirmed politely. "Our father booked them." "And where is your father?" Heather asked, looking past them as though expecting to find an adult. "He's on a business call. He'll be joining us shortly," Zora explained, maintaining her composure despite the growing discomfort. Heather's lips pursed. "I see. And who purchased these tickets?" Behind them, a white businessman in his 50s cleared his throat impatiently. The twins exchanged a quick glance, recognizing the familiar pattern of questioning that rarely happened to their white peers. "Our father did," Zaire repeated. "Jamal Carter. He's the CEO of Nextech Solutions." "Nextech," Heather repeated slowly, as though testing the veracity of the name. "I'm not familiar with that company." "It's a cybersecurity firm," Zora offered, her patience thinning. "Now, can we board? Our seats are confirmed." Instead of returning their boarding passes, Heather turned to her colleague. "Benjamin, could you come here for a moment?" The gate agent approached, his expression neutral but curious. "These two young people have first-class tickets," Heather explained, emphasizing young people in a way that made it clear she found this suspicious. "Their father supposedly purchased them but isn't present." Benjamin took the boarding passes, examining them with the same unwarranted scrutiny. "These were purchased yesterday?" 3 weeks ago, actually," Zaire corrected. "Our father always books in advance." The businessman behind them stepped forward. "Excuse me, is there a problem? These kids have valid tickets, right?" "Sir, we're just verifying some information," Benjamin responded curtly. "You can proceed to the general boarding line if you're in a hurry." "I'm in first class too," the man said, "and I don't appreciate the delay." Or the apparent profiling I'm witnessing? Heather's face flushed. Sir, we're simply following protocol for unaccompanied minors. We're 16, Zora interjected. We don't require accompaniment. And I'd wager you're not checking everyone's ID this thoroughly, the businessman added. More passengers were beginning to notice the holdup. Whispers spread through the gate area. The twins felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon them, some curious, some annoyed, some sympathetic. Benjamin pulled Heather aside for a whispered conversation. The twins could only catch fragments, legitimate tickets, no policy against, and, causing a scene. Meanwhile, Zora tried calling their father, but the call went straight to voicemail. Dad, we're having some trouble boarding. Call me back when you can. She turned to her brother. He must still be on that conference call. After what felt like an eternity, Heather and Benjamin returned. Benjamin forced a professional smile. We need to verify these tickets with the ticketing desk. If you could step aside for a moment. Why? Zaire asked, his voice steady but firm. Our tickets are valid. You've already checked them. It's just a precaution, Heather insisted. There have been instances of ticket fraud recently. The businessman scoffed loudly. Funny how ticket fraud only seems to happen to certain passengers. Benjamin shot him a warning look before turning back to the twins. This won't take long. The other passengers need to board. Reluctantly, Zora and Zaire stepped to the side. The businessman handed his ticket to Heather, who scanned it with a quick glance and gestured him aboard with a smile. One by one, the remaining first-class passengers boarded, none subjected to the same scrutiny as the twins. As they waited, more passengers filed past them, business class, then the general boarding groups. Each passing minute increased their humiliation. Students from their school would never believe they flew first class if they boarded last with Group 6. This is ridiculous, Zora muttered. Dad is going to be furious. After 20 excruciating minutes, during which they watched nearly half the plane board, Benjamin finally approached them again. We've verified your tickets. You can board now. No apology. No explanation for the delay. Just a reluctant admission that the tickets they knew were legitimate were, in fact, legitimate. As they finally walked down the jetway, Zaire whispered to his sister, should we text Dad? And worry him during his call? Let's wait until he gets here, Zora decided. Besides, the worst part is over. Unfortunately for the Carter twins, their ordeal was just beginning. The interior of the Boeing 787 gleamed with the sterile luxury of first class. Wide leather seats reclined nearly flat, personal entertainment screens displayed welcome messages, and flight attendants offered pre-departure beverages to already seated passengers. As Zora and Zaire made their way down the aisle, they felt the stares of curious passengers who had witnessed their delayed boarding. Heather Blackwell had boarded ahead of them and was now arranging items in a galley at the front of the cabin. When she spotted the twins entering, her smile vanished. She watched them like a security guard monitoring suspected shoplifters. 3A and 3B, Zaire murmured, pointing to their assigned seats by the window and middle of the third row. An older white passenger in 3C looked up from his newspaper, momentarily surprised as the twins approached. Zora offered a polite smile as she stowed her backpack in the overhead bin. Excuse me, she said as she needed to pass by him to reach her window seat. The man hesitated but then stood to let them through, his expression unreadable. No sooner had they settled into their seats than Heather appeared, hovering over them. May I see your boarding passes again, she asked, her voice artificially sweet but her eyes hard. Zora sighed but produced her pass from her pocket. Zaire did the same. Heather examined them with exaggerated care. There seems to be some confusion. These seats are in first class. Yes, Zaire replied evenly. That's why we're sitting in them. There must be a mistake, Heather insisted. These seats are typically reserved for our premium customers. A woman across the aisle looked up sharply. She was a striking black woman in her 40s with natural hair styled in an elegant updo, wearing a cashmere sweater and designer glasses. She observed the interaction with growing concern. "Our tickets are correct," Zora stated firmly. "You've already verified them twice." Heather's smile tightened. "Perhaps you misunderstood the boarding process. These may be standby upgrades that weren't properly processed. I'm sure your actual seats are in economy." "No," Zaire said, his voice still calm but now edged with frustration. "Our father purchased these first-class tickets specifically. There's no misunderstanding." "And where is your father?" Heather asked again, though she'd already heard the answer at the gate. "He's joining us shortly," Zora replied. "He's finishing a business call." The woman across the aisle finally spoke up. "Excuse me, but is there a problem? These young people have shown their boarding passes multiple times." Heather's attention snapped to the woman. "This doesn't concern you, ma'am." "Actually, I think it does," the woman replied, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "I'm Dr. Amara Washington, and I'm concerned about the treatment these passengers are receiving." Heather's expression flickered with recognition of Dr. Washington's title, but she quickly recovered. "I'm simply ensuring everyone is in their assigned seats, Doctor. It's standard procedure." "Is it standard procedure to question the same passengers 3 times when their documentation is in order?" Dr. Washington asked pointedly. Before Heather could respond, a man in a flight attendant uniform with a supervisor pin approached. "Is there an issue here, Heather?" "Mr. Parker," Heather said with visible relief. "These young people claim to have first-class tickets, but there seems to be some confusion about their seating assignment." The supervisor, Gregory Parker, was a balding man with a perpetual frown. He glanced at the twins, then at their boarding passes which Heather now held. "Who purchased these tickets?" he asked, bypassing the twins entirely and addressing Heather. "They say their father did, but he's not on board," Heather replied before either twin could answer. "He's coming," Zora insisted. "He's finishing an important business call in the terminal." Gregory's frown deepened. "I see. Well, until he arrives, perhaps you should wait in your actual assigned seats." "These are our assigned seats," Zaire said, his composure finally beginning to crack. "3A and 3B. It's printed right there on the boarding passes you're holding." Other passengers were now openly watching the confrontation. Some looked uncomfortable, others merely curious, and a few were recording discreetly with their phones. Gregory lowered his voice. "Listen, there's clearly been a mistake. First-class tickets are very expensive. Perhaps your father intended to purchase economy seats. The implication was clear, people like them couldn't afford first class." Dr. Washington stood up. "Excuse me, but this is becoming ridiculous. Their boarding passes clearly show first-class seats. On what grounds are you questioning their right to be here?" Gregory turned to her with a strained smile. "Ma'am, please return to your seat. We're handling this situation." "You're handling it poorly," she replied. "And I believe we all know why these particular passengers are being singled out." A few murmurs of agreement came from nearby passengers. Others looked away uncomfortably. Gregory's face hardened. "Ma'am, interfering with flight crew duties is against federal regulations. Please sit down immediately." Dr. Washington held her ground but returned to her seat, still watching intently. Gregory turned back to the twins. "I'm going to have to ask you to move to economy class until we can sort this out. We have a full flight today, and we need to begin our departure procedures." "But these are our seats," Zora protested, tears of frustration beginning to form in her eyes. "Either move to economy voluntarily, or we'll have to consider you disruptive passengers," Gregory stated flatly. "Your choice." The unfairness of it all hit Zaire like a physical blow. They had done nothing wrong. Their tickets were legitimate. Their seats were assigned. Yet they were being treated like criminals for simply existing in a space where people who looked like them weren't expected to be. "Fine," he said finally, standing up. "But I want your names and employee numbers. Both of you." Gregory ignored the request. "Heather will show you to available seats in economy." As they gathered their belongings, Dr. Washington pulled out her phone. "I'm documenting this entire incident," she announced. "And I'll be filing a formal complaint with the airline and the FAA." Gregory shot her a warning look but didn't respond. Several other passengers had their phones out now too. Humiliated and angry, the twins followed Heather toward the back of the plane, aware of dozens of eyes tracking their retreat from the privileged space they had rightfully purchased. What none of them realized was that Jamal Carter had just finished his emergency conference call and was now rushing toward the gate, completely unaware of what his children were enduring. The walk of shame from first class to economy felt endless. Each step down the narrow aisle burned into Zora and Zaire's memories as they passed row after row of curious, judgmental, or pitying eyes. Heather led them with brisk efficiency, clearly eager to resolve what she considered a disruption to her routine. "These should work," she said, stopping at row 27, where 2 middle seats were available in a completely full row. The overhead bins in this section were already packed to capacity. "Our carry-ons," Zaire pointed out. "There's no space up here." Heather glanced at their bags dismissively. "They'll need to be gate-checked then." "But they have our competition materials," Zora protested, her voice breaking slightly. "We need them with us." "Should have thought of that before trying to sit in seats you didn't purchase," Heather muttered, just loud enough for them to hear. Zora froze, the accumulated stress, humiliation, and injustice of the past hour finally breaking through her composed exterior. Tears spilled down her cheeks despite her desperate attempt to hold them back. "We did purchase those seats," she said, her voice wavering but loud enough that nearby passengers turned to look. "Our father paid for them. We had the boarding passes. You checked them 3 times. Heather's eyes widened at the outburst. "Lower your voice immediately or you will be removed from this flight." Zaire, normally the quiet one who avoided confrontation, stepped forward. "No. This is wrong and you know it. You never questioned anyone else's tickets like this. You never made anyone else move from their assigned seats. Just us. Why is that?" A flight attendant from economy approached, concerned by the commotion. "What's happening here?" "These 2 were attempting to sit in first class without proper tickets," Heather explained quickly. "We're relocating them to their correct seats." "That's a lie," Zaire said firmly. "We have first-class tickets. She knows it. The gate agent knew it. They just decided we don't belong there." The economy flight attendant, a young Asian woman whose name tag read Lily Chen, looked uncertainly between the twins and Heather. "I need to see the captain," Zora demanded through her tears. "This is discrimination and we're not going to just accept it." Heather's face hardened. "That's enough. You're causing a disturbance." Several passengers had begun recording the confrontation on their phones. One older black man stood up from his seat. "Let them show their boarding passes again." "What's the harm in that?" "Sir, please remain seated," Heather ordered. "This doesn't concern you." "Seems like it concerns all of us when we see kids being treated unfairly," he replied. From the front of the plane, Gregory Parker was making his way back toward the commotion. Behind him, Dr. Washington followed, clearly unwilling to let the situation unfold without witness. "What's the problem now?" Gregory demanded as he reached them. "They're refusing to take their seats and inciting other passengers," Heather reported. "That's not true," Zora protested. "We just want to sit in the seats we paid for." Gregory leaned in, lowering his voice to a threatening whisper. "Listen carefully. I've already contacted the air marshal on board. One more outburst and you'll both be escorted off this plane and added to the no-fly list. Is that what you want?" Zaire's eyes widened. The no-fly list would mean they'd miss their competition. All their work, all their preparation, gone because of this man's prejudice. Dr. Washington pushed forward. That is absolutely inappropriate. You're threatening minors for requesting fair treatment. Ma'am, this is your final warning to return to your seat, Gregory snapped. Or what? You'll have me removed too. For witnessing discrimination. Dr. Washington challenged. The tension in the cabin was palpable. Other passengers began speaking up, some supporting the twins, others complaining about the delay. The situation was spiraling out of control. Gregory pulled out his radio. I need security to the aircraft for passenger removal. Lily, the economy flight attendant, placed a gentle hand on Zora's shoulder. Maybe you should sit for now, and we can sort this out once we're in the air, she suggested kindly. Defeated and devastated, Zora nodded. What choice did they have? They couldn't miss their competition. Their team was counting on them. Their school was counting on them. As they reluctantly began to sit in the cramped middle seats, a voice rang out from the front of the plane. What the hell is going on with my children? Everyone turned to see a tall, impeccably dressed black man standing in the entryway of the aircraft, his expression a mixture of confusion and growing anger. Jamal Carter had arrived. Have you ever faced discrimination in a public space where you were made to feel like you didn't belong? Comment number 1 if you've ever been in a situation where you were judged unfairly based on your appearance. Hit that like button if you believe we need to keep exposing these incidents to create change. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories about standing up against injustice. Now, how do you think a powerful CEO father will react when he discovers his children being humiliated and discriminated against? Will the airline staff face consequences for their actions? Let's find out as this shocking confrontation reaches its boiling point. Jamal Carter cut an imposing figure as he strode down the aisle of the aircraft. At 6'2" with broad shoulders draped in a custom-tailored charcoal suit, he commanded attention even before people recognized who he was. His closely cropped hair showed distinguished touches of gray at the temples, and his expression was one of controlled fury as he took in the scene before him. Dad! Zora called out, relief washing over her tear-stained face. Passengers who had been watching the drama unfold now shifted their attention to this new development, many still recording with their phones. Gregory Parker's confident demeanor faltered slightly as he registered the newcomer's executive presence. Sir, are you with these passengers? Gregory asked, attempting to maintain his authoritative tone. These passengers, Jamal said evenly, are my children. And they appear to be standing in economy class despite having first-class tickets that I personally purchased 3 weeks ago. Heather stepped forward, her customer service smile snapping back into place. There seems to have been a misunderstanding, sir. We were just trying to. I heard what you were trying to do, Jamal interrupted, his voice deceptively calm. I was on the jetway for the last 3 minutes, listening to you threaten my 16-year-old children with removal from this flight and placement on a no-fly list. The color drained from Gregory's face. Sir, I believe you misheard. I don't believe I did, Jamal countered. And neither did the dozens of passengers who witnessed this interaction. Some of whom, I notice, have been recording it. Jamal turned to his children. Zora, Zaire, are you okay? They nodded, though Zora was still fighting back tears and Zaire's jaw was clenched tight with suppressed anger. Get your things, Jamal instructed them. We're going back to our assigned seats. As the twins collected their carry-ons, Jamal turned his attention back to the flight crew. I'd like your names and employee numbers. Both of you. Heather glanced nervously at Gregory, who had shifted into damage control mode. Sir, I apologize for any confusion. If you'd like to discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss privately, Jamal stated. My children were publicly humiliated. Any resolution will also be public. He pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, offering it to Gregory. My name is Jamal Carter. I'm the CEO of Nextech Solutions. Gregory hesitantly took the card, his eyes widening slightly as he recognized the name of the prominent cybersecurity firm. I'm also a Platinum Elite member of your airline's frequent flyer program, Jamal continued, pulling out his membership card. I fly over 75,000 miles annually with your company, usually in first class. Now, would you like to explain to me why my children were removed from the seats I purchased for them? The dynamic in the cabin had shifted dramatically. Passengers who had been watching now murmured among themselves, some nodding in approval at Jamal's calm but forceful approach. Gregory swallowed hard. Mr. Carter, there was simply a misunderstanding about the validity of their tickets. We have protocols. What protocols specifically require you to question the same boarding passes 3 times? Jamal asked. What protocols require you to assume my children stole or fraudulently obtained first-class tickets? What protocols allow you to threaten minors with a no-fly list for requesting to sit in their assigned seats? Heather interjected, Sir, we would have treated any unaccompanied minors the same way. They're 16, Jamal cut in. They don't require accompaniment under your airline's own policies, which I checked before booking their tickets. And somehow, I doubt you've removed any white teenagers from first class today. Dr. Washington approached from her seat. Mr. Carter, I witnessed the entire incident. I'm Dr. Amara Washington. I was sitting across from your children in first class when this began. They were singled out from the moment they tried to board. Jamal nodded appreciatively to her. Thank you, Doctor. I'd appreciate your contact information later. He turned back to Gregory and Heather. Now, we're going to return to our assigned seats in first class. Then you're going to explain to your captain why this flight is delayed, and why I'll be filing a formal complaint with your airline CEO, whom I happen to know personally. As they began moving toward the front of the plane, Jamal placed protective hands on his children's shoulders. Other passengers made way, some offering supportive nods or whispered encouragement. What Gregory and Heather didn't know, what no one yet realized, was that from the moment Jamal had stepped onto the plane and heard his children being threatened, he had been recording audio on his phone, which was tucked discreetly in his breast pocket. This wasn't the first time Jamal had encountered discrimination, nor was it the first time he had needed to defend himself or his family from prejudice. Growing up on Chicago's South Side, he had learned early that as a black man, his word alone would rarely be enough. Evidence was essential. Documentation was power. After losing his wife to cancer when the twins were just 7, Jamal had become even more protective. He had sat them down for the talk when they were 12, not just about how to interact with police, but how to navigate a world that would often see their skin before seeing their character or accomplishments. Document everything, he had taught them. Your word against theirs will always be questioned. Evidence speaks louder than accusations. As they reached the first-class cabin, the passengers there were watching with interest. The businessman who had defended them at the gate nodded to Jamal in recognition and approval. Gregory attempted one last face-saving maneuver. Mr. Carter, we apologize for the misunderstanding. Sometimes our staff must make quick judgments for security purposes. Jamal stopped and turned to face him directly. This wasn't a security judgment. This was profiling, pure and simple. And I won't let it pass. He held up his phone, revealing the active recording. I've documented this entire interaction, starting from when I heard you threatening my children on the jetway. Now, I'd like to speak with your captain before this plane leaves the gate. Gregory's face went pale. Heather took an involuntary step backward. I'll inform the captain, Gregory stammered, all pretense of authority now evaporated. As the twins settled back into their rightful seats, with Jamal taking his seat beside them, Dr. Washington leaned across the aisle. Your children handled themselves with remarkable dignity under terrible circumstances, she said quietly. They should be proud. Jamal nodded gratefully. Thank you for standing up for them when I couldn't be here. As Gregory disappeared into the cockpit to inform the captain of the situation, the power dynamic had completely reversed. The same flight attendants who had treated Zora and Zaire with suspicion and disdain now faced the consequences of their actions. And Jamal Carter had no intention of making those consequences easy to bear. The atmosphere in first class was thick with tension as Captain Alexandra Torres emerged from the cockpit. A Latina woman in her late 40s with streaks of gray in her black hair pulled back in a tight bun, she carried herself with the confident authority that came from decades of commanding aircraft and crews. "Mr. Carter," she asked, approaching their row. "I understand there's been an incident involving your family." Jamal stood to meet her, extending his hand. "Captain Torres, thank you for coming to address this personally. Yes, my children were subjected to discriminatory treatment by your flight crew." The captain shook his hand firmly. "I'd like to hear exactly what happened." "Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private," Gregory suggested nervously, hovering behind the captain. Captain Torres glanced at him sharply. "If the incident occurred in full view of the cabin, we can discuss it here." She turned back to Jamal. "Please, explain what happened." As Jamal recounted the events, from the extended scrutiny at the gate to the forced removal from first class and the threats made against the twins, Captain Torres's expression darkened. She occasionally glanced at Gregory and Heather, whose faces betrayed their growing discomfort. "We have recordings," Jamal concluded, gesturing to his phone and the various passengers who had documented the incident. "And numerous witnesses." Captain Torres nodded gravely. "Mr. Carter, on behalf of the airline, I want to apologize for your family's experience today. This is not representative of our company's values or policies." "With all due respect, Captain," Jamal replied, "when your employees act this way in uniform, it absolutely represents your company. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The captain straightened her shoulders. "First, I need statements from everyone involved, including witnesses. This will delay our departure, but I believe it's necessary." Dr. Washington spoke up. "I'd be happy to provide my account." Several other passengers nodded in agreement, including the businessman who had defended them at the gate and a few economy passengers who had witnessed the confrontation in the back. "Second," Captain Torres continued, "I'll be contacting our regional manager to address this situation immediately." She turned to Gregory and Heather. "Both of you will need to provide formal statements as well. In the meantime, I'm reassigning you to ground duties until this matter is investigated." Gregory's face flushed. "Captain, with all due respect, we're already short-staffed on this flight." "That's not my primary concern right now," she interrupted. "The treatment of our passengers is my priority. We can request replacement crew members." Heather's carefully maintained professional facade finally cracked. "But we'll miss our San Francisco layover rotation." "I have plans." "Plans change," Captain Torres cut her off coldly. "Actions have consequences." She turned back to Jamal. "Mr. Carter, I'll need about 30 minutes to arrange for replacement crew members and to take preliminary statements. Would you and your children prefer to remain on this flight, or would you like me to book you on a later departure?" Jamal glanced at his watch, then at the twins. "The STEM competition starts tomorrow morning. We need to reach San Francisco today." He looked at his children. "Are you comfortable continuing on this flight?" Zaire nodded firmly. "We've got our seats back. We're not letting them win by making us change our plans." Zora wiped the last traces of tears from her cheeks. "I agree. We should stay. Then we'll remain on this flight," Jamal told the captain. "But I expect this matter to be taken seriously." "It will be," Captain Torres assured him. She addressed the entire first-class cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. We'll be bringing in replacement crew members, which will take approximately 30 minutes. Thank you for your patience." As the captain returned to the cockpit to make arrangements, Gregory and Heather were instructed to deplane. They avoided eye contact with the Carter family as they gathered their personal items and made their way to the exit. No sooner had they left than Jamal's phone rang. The screen displayed unknown caller, but he had a suspicion about who it might be. He answered, putting the call on speaker. Jamal Carter speaking. Mr. Carter, this is Patricia Reynolds, Vice President of Customer Experience at Transcontinental Airlines. The voice was polished, professional, and tinged with barely concealed panic. I understand there was an incident involving your family on our flight to San Francisco today. News traveled fast. Someone, likely Captain Torres, had already escalated the situation to the executive level. That's correct, Ms. Reynolds, Jamal replied calmly. My children were racially profiled, publicly humiliated, and threatened with removal from a flight despite having valid first-class tickets that I purchased. I want to personally apologize for this inexcusable experience, she said. This is absolutely not in line with our values or training. I appreciate that, Jamal said, but apologies don't erase what my children experienced. Of course not, she agreed quickly. We'd like to offer your family immediate compensation, complimentary tickets, additional frequent flyer miles, and vouchers for future travel. Jamal's expression hardened. Ms. Reynolds, I'm not interested in vouchers or miles. What I want is accountability and systemic change. The crew members involved should face appropriate consequences, and your company needs to evaluate its training procedures to address implicit bias. There was a brief pause before she responded. I completely understand. The crew members have already been removed from duty pending a full investigation. And I'd like to discuss more substantive remedies with you once you've reached San Francisco. During this conversation, Jamal noticed his children exchanging glances. They had seen this dance before, corporations rushing to contain PR disasters with quick settlements and vague promises of change. We'll discuss it further, Jamal conceded. But you should know that I've already been contacted by several news outlets. Passengers have shared videos of the incident online. This wasn't actually true yet, but Jamal knew how these situations unfolded. It was only a matter of time before the videos went viral. I understand, Patricia said, a new note of urgency in her voice. Our CEO would like to speak with you directly. Would you be available for a call after your flight lands? I'll make time, Jamal agreed. For now, we'd like to reach our destination without further incident. After ending the call, Dr. Washington leaned over. They're in full damage control mode already. Jamal nodded. It won't be enough. As replacement crew members boarded the plane and prepared for departure, Jamal received a text from Sydney, his COO, videos of the incident hitting social media. Press reaching out for comment. How do you want to handle? The situation was escalating faster than even he had anticipated. The airline executives were right to be concerned. Jamal had built his reputation and his company on principles of integrity and accountability. He had faced discrimination throughout his career, being mistaken for janitorial staff at his own company, being asked for ID when his white colleagues weren't, having his expertise questioned despite his credentials. Each time, he had documented, advocated, and when necessary, litigated. This time was different. This time, they had targeted his children. As the plane finally pushed back from the gate, nearly an hour behind schedule, Jamal knew that the real battle was just beginning. The airline had offered compensation to protect their brand. But he wanted something more valuable, change. 37,000 feet above the Rocky Mountains, Zora stared out the window at the snow-capped peaks below. The replacement flight crew had been excessively polite since takeoff, offering the Carter family complimentary meals, premium headphones, and frequent check-ins to ensure their comfort. The captain had personally visited first class to apologize again and assure them that a full investigation was underway. None of it erased what had happened. You're quiet, Jamal observed, gently touching his daughter's arm. Are you okay? Zora turned from the window. I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't shown up when you did. But I did show up, Jamal reminded her. That's just it, Dad, Zaire interjected from his seat. You won't always be there. What happens next time when we're alone? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Jamal had spent years teaching his children to navigate a world that would often judge them unfairly, but experiencing that reality firsthand was different from theoretical lessons. You document, you advocate, and you stand your ground, Jamal said finally. Just like you were doing before I arrived. I'm proud of how you both handled yourselves. Zora's phone chimed with an incoming message. It's Jordan from the team, she said, scanning the text. They've seen the videos online. It's spreading fast. Indeed, while they had been in the air, clips of the confrontation had begun circulating on social media. #FirstClassWhileBlack was trending, with thousands sharing similar experiences of being questioned, challenged, or removed from spaces where their presence was deemed suspicious solely because of their race. Jamal's phone had been buzzing constantly with notifications. Texts from friends and colleagues, emails from media outlets requesting interviews, messages from Nextech's PR team seeking guidance on how to respond. He had kept it in airplane mode since takeoff, wanting to focus on his children rather than the growing media storm. Dr. Washington, who had been reading quietly across the aisle, looked over at them. I hope you don't mind, but I've been following the online response to what happened. Your experience has struck a chord with many people. I'm not surprised, Jamal replied. This happens every day to black people across the country. The only difference is that most don't have the platform or resources to make it visible. Dr. Washington nodded in understanding. I've faced similar situations in hospitals. Patients assuming I'm a nurse or staff member rather than the surgeon. Being asked to prove my credentials when my white colleagues aren't. It's exhausting, Zora said quietly. Always having to prove you belong. It is, Dr. Washington agreed. But that's why documentation and visibility matter. When these incidents are exposed, it becomes harder for companies to pretend they don't have a problem. A soft ding signaled an incoming email on Jamal's tablet. Despite keeping his phone off, he had connected his tablet to the in-flight Wi-Fi to monitor urgent business matters. The new message was from Transcontinental Airlines legal department. They're offering a settlement, Jamal said, scanning the document. $250,000 in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement. Zaire's eyebrows rose. That's a lot of money. It's hush money, Jamal corrected. They want to make this go away quietly. While the twins considered this information, a white passenger from a few rows ahead approached their seats. He was in his 60s, with thinning gray hair and an expensive watch that suggested financial success. Excuse me, he said, addressing Jamal. I didn't speak up earlier when I should have, and I want to apologize for that. I witnessed how your children were treated, and I remained silent. Jamal studied the man thoughtfully. Thank you for acknowledging that. May I ask why you didn't say something at the time? The man shifted uncomfortably. I told myself it wasn't my place to get involved. But the truth is, I was concerned about creating conflict that might delay the flight. He paused. It was selfish and cowardly. It's a common response, Jamal said, not unkindly. But silence in the face of injustice only protects the status quo. I know that now, the man admitted. I've already filed a complaint with the airline about what I witnessed. If you need another statement for any legal proceedings, I'd be happy to provide one. After the man returned to his seat, Zaire turned to his father. Are we going to sue them? Jamal considered the question carefully. We have several options. We could accept their settlement and move on. We could pursue legal action for discrimination. Or we could leverage this moment to push for systemic changes in how they train their staff and handle similar situations in the future. Which would make the biggest difference? Zora asked. Before Jamal could answer, his tablet chimed again. This time it was a message from Sydney, his COO, board members calling emergency meeting to discuss incident. Some concerned about potential impact on DoD contract negotiations if this becomes a major news story. Need your input ASAP. Jamal frowned. Nextech was in the final stages of securing a massive cybersecurity contract with the Department of Defense, the same contract that had required his emergency call at the airport. Some board members, particularly those from more conservative backgrounds, might worry that public controversy could jeopardize the government's willingness to partner with them. It was a reminder that even as a CEO, Jamal operated within systems where speaking out carried risks. The same calculation faced countless black professionals who witnessed or experienced discrimination: speak up and potentially damage your career, or remain silent and preserve your position at the cost of your dignity. Dad? Zora prompted, noticing his distraction. Jamal set the tablet aside. Some of our board members are concerned about how this might affect the company. Are you going to back down? Zaire asked, studying his father's expression. No, Jamal said firmly. But we need to be strategic about how we proceed. As the flight continued westward, Jamal weighed their options. Accepting the settlement would be the easiest path, but it would also ensure that no meaningful change occurred. Legal action would be lengthy and public, potentially subjecting the twins to unwanted attention during a critical academic year. The third option, using this incident as leverage for systemic change, offered the possibility of broader impact, but required careful negotiation. The plane began its initial descent into San Francisco. Through the window, the iconic Golden Gate Bridge came into view, its red span stretching across the bay. In less than an hour, they would land to find airline executives, Nextech's legal team, and possibly media waiting for them. Here's what I propose, Jamal said finally. We meet with the airline executives as planned. We hear their offer. But instead of simply accepting or rejecting it, we present our own terms: comprehensive anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, transparent reporting of discrimination complaints, and financial support for organizations that promote racial equity in travel and hospitality. The twins exchanged glances, considering their father's proposal. What if they refuse? Zora asked. Then we proceed with legal action and share our story publicly, Jamal said. But I suspect they'll recognize that implementing real changes is ultimately less costly than the alternative, both financially and reputationally. As the landing gear deployed with a mechanical whir, Jamal reflected on what truly mattered in this moment. The DoD contract was important for Nextech's growth, but his responsibility to his children, and to the broader principle of dignity and equal treatment, took precedence. The twins had already experienced how quickly privilege could be stripped away based solely on appearance. How their academic achievements, their father's success, and even their paid first-class tickets offered insufficient protection against bias. It was a harsh lesson, but one that could potentially create ripples of change far beyond this single flight. We stand our ground, Jamal said as the plane touched down on the runway. Together. Zora and Zaire nodded in unison, their expressions reflecting both the weight of the day's events and the resolve to transform their experience into meaningful action. As the plane taxied to the gate, they prepared to face whatever awaited them in San Francisco, airline executives desperate to contain the situation, media eager for a story, and the STEM competition that had brought them here in the first place. What they couldn't yet know was how this single incident would catalyze changes that would extend far beyond one airline or one family's experience. The private conference room at San Francisco International Airport buzzed with tension. On one side of the polished mahogany table sat the Carter family, Jamal in the center, flanked by Zora and Zaire. On the other side, a phalanx of airline representatives: Patricia Reynolds, VP of Customer Experience, Thomas Wilkins, Chief Legal Officer, and Robert Chin, Regional Director of Flight Operations. Standing along the wall behind the Carters were Jackson Howard and Priya Sharma, Nextech's lead attorneys, who had flown in from the company's San Francisco office as soon as news of the incident broke. Their presence sent a clear message: the Carters would not be navigating this situation alone or unprepared. Again, Mr. Carter, we want to express our deepest apologies for the treatment your family experienced, Patricia began, her voice practiced in the art of corporate contrition. "It was completely unacceptable and does not reflect our company values." Jamal nodded but remained silent, allowing the airline representatives to continue their carefully rehearsed statements. "We've taken immediate action," Thomas Wilkins added. "The flight attendant and supervisor involved have been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. We're prepared to offer substantial compensation to acknowledge the gravity of this incident." He slid a document across the table. An updated settlement offer, now increased to $500,000 in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement and release of all claims. Jamal glanced at the document without touching it. "Before we discuss compensation, I'd like to understand what systemic changes you're planning to prevent similar incidents in the future." The airline executives exchanged uneasy glances. "We already have diversity training programs in place for all employees," Robert Chin offered. "We're committed to reviewing and strengthening those programs in light of this incident." "Vague commitments to review existing programs aren't sufficient," Priya Sharma interjected, speaking for the first time. "My clients are interested in specific, measurable actions with clear timelines for implementation." Outside the conference room, the situation was evolving rapidly. Videos of the incident had accumulated millions of views across social media platforms. #FirstClassWhileBlack had expanded to include thousands of similar accounts from black travelers who had faced discrimination on flights, in hotels, and at restaurants. Several civil rights organizations had issued statements condemning the airline and calling for industry-wide reforms. Meanwhile, the twins' teammates from the STEM competition had arrived at their hotel, texting updates and expressions of support. Their coach, Dr. Imani Williams, had offered to postpone their presentation if needed, but Zora and Zaire were determined not to let the incident derail their participation. Back in the conference room, Patricia Reynolds attempted to regain control of the narrative. "Mr. Carter, we value your input on how we can improve. Perhaps you could share some specific suggestions." Jamal exchanged a glance with his attorneys, who nodded slightly. They had anticipated this request and prepared accordingly. "Actually, we've outlined a comprehensive proposal," Jamal said, as Jackson Howard distributed copies of a document titled, "Framework for Equitable Customer Experience." The airline executives accepted the documents with visible surprise. "This framework includes mandatory quarterly anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, conducted by independent experts in racial equity," Jamal explained. "It establishes an independent review board to evaluate discrimination complaints. It requires transparent reporting of incidents and resolutions. And it creates a fund to support organizations that promote equity in travel and hospitality, with a specific focus on addressing the challenges faced by travelers of color." Thomas Wilkins flipped through the document, his expression growing increasingly concerned. "These are extensive demands." "They're not demands," Jamal corrected. "They're solutions to a systemic problem that affected my family today and countless others before us." "Implementing all of these measures would be extremely costly," Patricia pointed out. "More costly than the reputational damage you're currently experiencing?" Priya asked pointedly. "More costly than defending a class action lawsuit if other affected passengers join my clients in seeking remedies?" The mention of a potential class action visibly unsettled the airline representatives. "We need time to review these proposals with our executive leadership," Thomas said finally. "Of course," Jamal agreed. "We understand this requires careful consideration. In the meantime, my children have a STEM competition to prepare for, which was the purpose of this trip before it was overshadowed by discrimination." As the meeting concluded with promises to reconvene the following afternoon, Jamal's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Sydney Williams, his COO. "The board meeting just ended," Sydney reported when Jamal stepped outside to take the call. It was contentious. "Harrison and Fitzgerald are concerned about potential blowback on the DoD contract." Harrison and Fitzgerald were the most conservative members of Nexteca's board, both former military with deep connections in government contracting. "What's their specific concern?" Jamal asked. They're worried that if you push too hard on this airline situation, it might be perceived as playing the race card by some of the more conservative officials on the procurement committee, Sydney explained, disapproval evident in her tone. Their words, not mine. Jamal exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar weight of the double standard he'd navigated throughout his career. White executives were praised for taking principled stands, black executives were scrutinized for being divisive when addressing racism. And the rest of the board? Split, Sydney admitted. Some fully support you taking a stand. Others are nervous about potential distractions from our core business. They've called an emergency session for tomorrow to discuss further. This added another layer of complexity to an already challenging situation. As they left the airport and headed to their hotel, Jamal considered the competing priorities: supporting his children, seeking accountability from the airline, managing his company's interests, and navigating the broader implications for racial equity in corporate America. At the hotel, they found Dr. Williams and the rest of the STEM team waiting in the lobby. The group of teenagers, diverse in background but united in their passion for innovation, surrounded Zora and Zaire with supportive embraces and expressions of outrage at what they had endured. "We've got your backs," assured Aiden Patel, their team captain. "We can reschedule our presentation slot if you need more time." "No," Zaire said firmly. "We didn't come this far to let discrimination knock us off course." "That's right," Zora added. "Our algorithm for optimizing emergency response resources in underserved communities is too important to delay." Watching his children draw strength from their peers and recommit to their purpose, Jamal felt a surge of pride mixed with lingering anger. They were handling this situation with more grace and resilience than many adults would demonstrate, but they shouldn't have had to develop such resilience in the first place. Later that evening, after the twins had joined their team to finalize their presentation, Jamal met privately with his attorneys in the hotel's business center. "The airline's CEO has requested a personal meeting tomorrow morning," Jackson informed him. "Before your board convenes and before our scheduled follow-up with their legal team." "They're trying to contain this," Priya added. "Social media pressure is intensifying. Several celebrities have shared the videos and condemned the airline. At least 3 major civil rights organizations have reached out to us offering support if you decide to pursue legal action." Jamal nodded, absorbing this information. "And what's your assessment of their likely response to our proposed framework?" "They'll try to negotiate down the scope and financial commitment," Jackson predicted. "But they're in a vulnerable position. The videos are damning. They know it." As they discussed strategy for the upcoming meetings, Jamal's phone lit up with a text from Zora: "Team presentation is ready. We're going to crush it tomorrow. Thanks for teaching us to stand our ground." The message crystallized what had been forming in Jamal's mind throughout the day. This wasn't just about one incident or one airline. It was about the world his children would inherit, a world where they shouldn't have to constantly prove they belonged in spaces they had every right to occupy. "We proceed with the full framework," Jamal decided. "No compromise on the core elements. They can adjust implementation timelines if necessary, but the substance remains intact." His attorneys nodded in agreement. "And if they refuse?" Priya asked. "Then we decline their settlement, file suit, and share our story publicly," Jamal said. "But I suspect it won't come to that. They have more to lose by fighting than by reforming." As Jamal prepared for bed that night, he reflected on the day's events, from the urgent call that had separated him from his children at the airport to the discrimination they had faced in his absence to the complex negotiations now underway. Throughout his career, he had worked to build a company that not only delivered excellent technology but also embodied principles of equity and justice. Now those principles were being tested in a deeply personal way. Tomorrow would bring critical decisions, for the airline, for Nexteca's board, and for the Carter family. As Jamal drifted towards sleep, he remained certain of one thing: sometimes the most important business wasn't securing contracts or pleasing shareholders, but standing firm in the face of injustice, even when it would be easier to accept a settlement and move on. Some principles weren't negotiable. Some moments demanded a stand. This was one of them. 3 months later, Jamal Carter stood at the podium in Nextech's Atlanta headquarters, addressing a room filled with employees, media representatives, and special guests. The wall behind him displayed the logos of Nextech Solutions and Transcontinental Airlines side by side. "Today marks a significant milestone," Jamal began, his deep voice carrying throughout the space. "Not just for our companies, but for an industry that has long struggled with issues of equity and inclusion." In the front row sat Zora and Zaire, now 17 and fresh from their junior year final exams. Beside them was Dr. Amara Washington, who had become a close family friend and ally in the months since their fateful flight. "3 months ago, my children experienced discrimination that no passenger should ever face," Jamal continued. "They were questioned, humiliated, and threatened. Not because of any action on their part, but because their presence in first class didn't align with certain preconceptions about who belongs in premium spaces." The room was silent, attendees hanging on his every word. "When offered a substantial financial settlement in exchange for our silence, we faced a choice," Jamal said. "We could accept compensation that would benefit our family alone, or we could push for systemic changes that would benefit countless travelers for years to come." He gestured to the woman standing nearby, Catherine Martinez, the new CEO of Transcontinental Airlines, who had been appointed following the resignation of her predecessor amid the fallout from the Carter's experience. "I'm pleased to announce that we chose the latter path, and Transcontinental Airlines chose to join us in that journey." Catherine stepped forward to the podium. "What happened to the Carter family exposed serious flaws in our training, our culture, and our accountability systems," she acknowledged. "Rather than defensively minimizing these issues or treating them as isolated incidents, we've committed to fundamental transformation." She outlined the changes implemented over the past 3 months. The airline had established mandatory quarterly anti-bias training for all 23,000 customer-facing employees, conducted by independent experts in racial equity. They had created an independent review board to evaluate discrimination complaints, with representatives from civil rights organizations and diverse community leaders. They had implemented transparent reporting of incidents and resolutions, with quarterly public updates. Most significantly, they had established a $20 million fund to support organizations promoting equity in travel and hospitality, with a specific focus on addressing challenges faced by travelers of color. "These aren't just corporate policies," Catherine emphasized. "They represent a fundamental shift in how we operate and how we define excellent customer service. Excellence cannot exist without equity." What she didn't mention, though many in the room knew, was that Heather Blackwell and Gregory Parker had been terminated following a thorough investigation. However, rather than simply dismissing them, the airline had required their participation in restorative justice programs designed to address bias and build understanding. As Catherine returned to her seat, Jamal resumed speaking. "This partnership extends beyond these reforms. Today, we're announcing that Nextech Solutions will be providing cybersecurity services for Transcontinental Airlines' entire digital infrastructure, a 5-year contract that represents our shared commitment to transformation and excellence." The DoD contract that had been in jeopardy during the height of the controversy had ultimately been secured as well. Contrary to the fears of some board members, Nextech's principled stance had enhanced rather than damaged their reputation with government partners who valued integrity alongside technical expertise. "Now, I'd like to invite my children to share their perspective," Jamal said, stepping aside for Zora and Zaire. The twins approached the podium together, poised and confident in a way that reflected both their natural self-assurance and the growth that comes from navigating adversity. "3 months ago, we were just focused on our STEM competition," Zora began. "Which we won, by the way," Zaire added with a smile, prompting appreciative laughter from the audience. Their algorithm for optimizing emergency response resources in underserved communities had indeed taken first place, earning them recognition, scholarships, and interest from top universities. "But that experience on the plane taught us something important," Zora continued. "When you face discrimination, you have options beyond simply enduring it or fighting it alone. We've established the Carter Family Foundation to support young people of color in STEM fields and to provide resources for teenagers experiencing discrimination in educational and public spaces, Zaire explained. The foundation, funded initially by a portion of Nexteca's profits and supported by contributions from corporate partners, had already launched mentorship programs in 20 schools across 5 states. We're also proud to announce that we'll be serving as youth ambassadors for Transcontinental's new Equity in Travel initiative, Zora added. Because representation matters, and seeing young people who look like us in these spaces helps normalize our presence for the next generation. After the twins concluded their remarks, Dr. Washington joined them at the podium to announce her role as chairperson of the newly formed independent review board overseeing discrimination complaints across Transcontinental's operations. As a black woman who has navigated predominantly white spaces throughout my medical career, I understand the importance of accountability and transparency, she said. This board isn't just about addressing individual incidents after they occur, it's about creating a culture where such incidents become increasingly rare. The formal presentation concluded with Jamal and Catherine signing the cybersecurity contract and cutting a symbolic ribbon to launch the new partnership. As attendees mingled during the reception that followed, journalists cornered Jamal with questions about the broader implications of the agreement. "Do you think other airlines will follow Transcontinental's example?" asked a reporter from the Wall Street Journal. "They're already beginning to," Jamal noted. 3 major carriers have announced similar training programs in the past month alone. No company wants to be perceived as lagging behind on issues of equity and inclusion. "Was it worth potentially risking your business relationships to take this stand?" inquired another journalist. Jamal considered the question carefully. There was certainly risk involved, he acknowledged. Some board members and clients were concerned about potential controversy. But principles that bend under pressure aren't principles at all. They're conveniences. And in the end, standing firm on these issues has strengthened our company culture and our market position, not weakened them. Later that evening, as the Carter family prepared to board a flight to Washington, D.C. for meetings with legislators interested in supporting the foundation's work, they approached the first-class check-in counter at Atlanta International Airport, the same airport where their journey had begun 3 months earlier. The agent checking their tickets smiled in recognition. "The Carter family. It's an honor to serve you today." Behind her, a large poster displayed Transcontinental's new tagline, "Everyone belongs in first class." As they moved through the terminal toward security, Jamal noticed something significant. The twins walked with their heads held high, not bracing for questioning or suspicion. They carried themselves with the confidence of people who knew they belonged wherever they chose to go. That transformation, from anticipating discrimination to expecting respect, represented the most meaningful outcome of their ordeal. Not the policy changes, not the foundation, not even the corporate partnership, but the reclamation of dignity and belonging that is every person's birthright. When they reached their gate, they found a diverse flight crew waiting to greet them. The captain, a young black woman, recognized the twins from their recent media appearances. "We're honored to have you on board," she said, extending her hand. "Your courage changed our industry for the better." As they settled into their first-class seats without challenge or question, Zora leaned over to her father. "Do you think it will last? All these changes?" Jamal considered her question thoughtfully. Change is never linear or guaranteed. There will always be resistance and backsliding. But once people see what's possible, once they experience environments where dignity is the baseline expectation, it becomes harder to accept anything less. The plane taxied toward the runway, carrying them toward new opportunities to extend the impact of their experience. Behind them in Atlanta, the frameworks and foundations they had established continued their work. Ahead in Washington, policymakers awaited their insights on creating more equitable systems. And all around them, in ways both visible and invisible, the world had shifted, not dramatically enough to eliminate centuries of discrimination, but meaningfully enough to create pathways toward a future where no one would be questioned about belonging in spaces they had every right to occupy. It wasn't a perfect resolution. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings are the most important part of any journey. This story reminds us that true change requires courage to reject easy solutions in favor of systemic reform. The Carters could have accepted a financial settlement and moved on, but they recognized that individual compensation does nothing to protect the next family from experiencing the same discrimination. By leveraging their privilege and platform, they transformed a humiliating experience into industry-wide accountability. We also see the importance of documentation in fighting discrimination. Jamal's recording provided irrefutable evidence that moved the situation beyond a "he said, she said" scenario. In today's world, such evidence can be the difference between being dismissed and being heard. Perhaps most importantly, this story highlights how discrimination persists regardless of accomplishment or status. Despite being the children of a successful CEO, Zora and Zaire were still judged by the color of their skin rather than the content of their tickets. No amount of success fully shields people of color from bias. But strategic advocacy can help dismantle the systems that enable such treatment. Have you ever witnessed someone turning a negative experience into positive change? What would you have done in the Carters' position, accept the settlement or push for systemic reforms? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about standing up against discrimination. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message of resilience and transformation. Thank you for joining us today, and remember, your voice has the power to create lasting change.